You ever notice some problems just disappear? One day they're there. Next day, gone. No noise. No mess. No questions. That ain't luck. That's clean sweep disposal. We don't advertise. We don't ask. And we definitely don't leave things unfinished. Routes get cleared. Issues get handled. Situations get resolved permanently. Because around here, if it's still around, it's still a problem. Clean sweep disposal. Out of sight, out of mind. Sure. City stays clean, one way or another.
Grace Kelly, Monaco, the Mafia, and the Princess They Bought. A Pizzaverse Studios documentary. A Palermo Productions original. Written by Bambi Palermo. Narrated by Vincent DiPrio. The world cheered for the wedding of the century, entirely unaware they were watching a hostage handover. Grace Kelly didn't marry a prince. She paid a $2 million ransom to become the exclusive property of the Italian Mafia. Monaco was a bankrupt rock running on blood money. And billionaire Aristotle Onassis needed the Queen of Hollywood to wash billions in illicit cash. But you cannot divorce a criminal syndicate. When the royal asset finally became a political liability, the mob didn't send lawyers. They cleanly severed the brakes of her 2-ton rover. The fairy tale didn't end in a tragic mountain crash. It ended in an execution. Whatever the truth behind the tragedy, the roots of this marriage were anything but fairy tale. It stemmed from a harsh reality that forced the kingdom to seek a way out. The grim balance sheets of Monte Carlo in the mid-1950s revealed the true brutality of this transaction. The principality was dying. The post-war economic boom had entirely bypassed the tiny nation. The legendary casinos were empty shells. The roulette wheels spun in silent, dusty rooms. The velvet curtains were fading. The yachts in the harbor were rusting, and the royal treasury was completely depleted. Prince Rainier was a monarch ruling over a graveyard of debt. The men who really owned Monaco. The man who actually owned Monaco did not wear a crown. Aristotle Onassis, the ruthless Greek shipping magnate, had quietly bought up the controlling shares of the Société des Bains de Mer. This was the holding company that owned the casino, the luxury hotels, and essentially the entire economy of the principality. Onassis was a man who viewed sovereign nations as chess pieces and human beings as currency. Onassis did not operate in a vacuum. The casinos of Monte Carlo were historically prime real estate for the movement of illicit funds. The Italian Cosa Nostra had deep entrenched interests in ensuring the roulette tables remained a viable washing machine for dirty cash flowing out of Europe and the United States. But a washing machine needs dirty clothes. And more importantly, it needs the illusion of high society to mask the stench of blood and extortion. The mob bosses and the billionaire looked at their failing investment and realized a drastic measure was required. They needed a lure. They needed a beacon bright enough to blind the international press and attract the ultra-rich back to the gambling tables. They needed a mascot to legitimize their criminal enterprise. The syndicate issued an ultimatum to Prince Rainier. Find a bride. Not just any bride. A global icon. A woman whose face could rebrand a dying nation overnight and bring the cameras flocking back to the Mediterranean. Why they chose Grace Kelly. They held auditions, though they never documented them as such. Marilyn Monroe was the first obvious choice. She possessed raw, undeniable star power, but the syndicate executives rejected her immediately. Monroe was deemed too cheap. She was too volatile. She reeked of scandal, vulnerability, and unpredictability. A global money laundering operation requires absolute stability. They needed an immaculate facade. They needed a woman who looked like old money, someone who projected an aura of untouchable aristocratic purity. They needed Grace Kelly. Born on November 12, 1929, into a fiercely competitive and wealthy Philadelphia family, Grace Kelly was conditioned from birth to project flawless composure. Her father was a self-made millionaire who demanded absolute perfection and offered zero emotional warmth. Grace learned very early that affection was transactional, awarded only for impeccable public performance. She took this icy discipline to Hollywood. By the mid-1950s, she was the undisputed ice queen of cinema. She won an Academy Award. She worked closely with Alfred Hitchcock. She wore Dior and pearls. She was the absolute embodiment of aristocratic grace, a woman who seemed entirely above the muck and grime of ordinary life. But the public image was a heavy, suffocating armor. Grace Kelly was exhausted. The Hollywood studio system was a meat grinder. It was a brutal factory run by studio heads who treated actors like indentured servants. They dictated what she wore, who she dated, and what films she made. She was a highly paid piece of property owned by Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer. She despised the lack of control. She craved autonomy. She craved absolute power. She wanted a status so high that no studio boss could ever yell at her again. She wanted to be truly untouchable. This ambition made her the perfect mark. The courtship was a public relations campaign. The men in Monaco did not have to kidnap her. They simply set the trap, gilded the bars, and let her walk right in. The courtship was a meticulously choreographed public relations campaign. Prince Rainier was deployed to the Cannes Film Festival. A photo opportunity was arranged at the palace. The prince and the movie star. It was completely staged. It was deliberate. Rainier played the part of the lonely, dashing monarch looking for a queen. Grace played the part of the enchanted starlet swept off her feet. But beneath the polite conversation and the flashing cameras, the brutal terms of the merger were being negotiated by their respective handlers behind closed doors. Grace Kelly was not an innocent lamb stumbling blindly into a predator's lair. She willingly walked into the cage. She desperately wanted the crown. But the crown was not free. The principality of Monaco was so destitute that they demanded a dowry. It was a staggering, almost medieval demand in the modern era. The syndicate required a massive cash injection to seal the deal and prove her commitment. Grace Kelly had to pay $2 million out of her own pocket. She handed over nearly her entire personal fortune, the money she had bled for under the hot studio lights, just to buy her way into royalty. She believed the title of princess would grant her absolute sovereignty over her own life and permanently shield her from the studio bosses. Instead, the massive dowry financed her entry into a deeply restrictive institution. The wedding of the century. The wedding day was a masterpiece of global deception. The newsreel cameras rolled, capturing the beautiful bride in her pearl-studded gown. The world celebrated the triumph of love. Archival footage of the wedding reveals a stark contrast. Beyond the flowers and the lace, the background was populated not just by royalty, but by figures like Aristotle Onassis, watching the ceremony with cold satisfaction. He was not witnessing a holy sacrament. He was watching an asset acquisition. He was watching his new multi-million-dollar mascot being branded. Grace Kelly stood at the altar and spoke her vows. She promised to love and obey. She did not know that she was signing a binding contract with the underworld. She thought she was marrying a man. She was actually marrying a syndicate. As the rings were exchanged, the steel trap snapped shut. The door to the outside world locked. The independent queen of Hollywood was dead. The exclusive property of Monte Carlo was born. The honeymoon yacht. The morning after the wedding of the century, the Mediterranean sun illuminated the pink facade of the prince's palace. Grace Kelly woke up a princess. She walked to the heavy glass windows and looked down at the courtyard. The guards stood at attention. The tourists gathered at the gates. She had achieved the ultimate elevation of status. She possessed a title that commanded global reverence. But the silence in the massive stone bedroom was absolute. It was the silence of a vault. The honeymoon was spent on a yacht. The yacht did not belong to Prince Rainier. It belonged to Aristotle Onassis. This was not a romantic gesture. It was a demonstration of ownership. The billionaire was reminding the newlywed couple who actually paid for the fuel. Grace sat on the polished deck. The sea breeze blew through her hair. She smiled for the photographers hovering in small boats nearby. But her husband spent hours below deck in hushed conversations with the Greek magnate and silent men in sharp suits. Grace was not invited to these meetings. She was the trophy sitting on the hood of the car. The men below were discussing the engine. They were discussing the flow of illicit capital. They were discussing how to leverage the flawless face of the woman sitting upstairs. The acting ban. When the yacht returned to port, the true nature of the contract was activated. Grace expected to resume her career. She was the most bankable star in the world. She had scripts waiting on her desk in California. She assumed her new royal status would simply give her unprecedented leverage over the studio bosses. She assumed she would dictate her own terms. She brought up her shooting schedule over dinner. Rainier did not argue. He simply stated the facts. There would be no more films. There would be no more acting. The career was over. Grace was stunned. She argued. She pleaded. She cited artistic integrity. She cited her passion for the craft. Rainier remained entirely cold. He explained that a princess of Monaco does not perform for the amusement of the working class. It was presented as a matter of royal protocol. It was a lie. The prohibition had nothing to do with aristocratic tradition. It had everything to do with the syndicate's concept of possession. The men who controlled the Monte Carlo casinos, the men connected to the Cosa Nostra and the international smuggling rings, did not view Grace Kelly as an artist. They viewed her as collateral. They viewed her as a highly expensive corporate asset. A criminal organization does not share its most valuable mascot with the general public. Allowing Grace to act in a Hollywood movie would mean allowing another director to control her image. It would mean allowing another corporation to profit from her face. It would dilute the brand. The Mafia operates on absolute exclusivity. A mob boss does not let his prized possession dance on a screen for strangers. He keeps her in a display case. He wears her on his arm to show his rivals his absolute power. The acting ban was not about protecting royal dignity. It was a violent territorial marker. It was a message to the world. She is ours. Nobody else can touch her. The casino bait. Grace realized she had fundamentally misunderstood the transaction. She thought she had outsmarted Hollywood. She thought she had bought her way out of the studio meat grinder. She had actually sold herself into a much darker servitude. She had emptied her personal fortune for the privilege of a title. Her hard-earned Hollywood wealth was gone, absorbed into the bankrupt treasury of Monaco, leaving her entirely financially dependent on a regime heavily influenced by shadow investors. She had traded Jack Warner for Aristotle Onassis. Warner wanted box office receipts. Onassis wanted a human shield for a global money laundering operation. The mechanics of this operation required her constant participation. The Casino of Monte Carlo was the dark, beating heart of the principality. It was a massive financial centrifuge designed to take dirty money from Naples, from Palermo, from New York, and spin it until it looked clean. But a casino needs legitimate high rollers to mask the illicit transactions. It needs billionaires and aristocrats to provide cover for the drug lords and the extortionists. This is where Grace Kelly earned her keep. Every evening she was required to dress in haute couture. She was required to wear millions of dollars in diamonds. She was required to descend the grand staircase of the casino. Her mere presence altered the atmosphere of the room. The moment she entered the gambling hall, the air shifted. The tourists gasped. The legitimate businessmen puffed their chests. The true power brokers, the men in the shadows, nodded in quiet satisfaction. Grace would sit at a baccarat table. She would smile her perfect icy smile. She would place a few chips on the green felt. Her pristine image provided the perfect cover for laundering illicit funds. Her flawless reputation acted as a sanitizing agent. The wealthy industrialists from London and Paris flocked to the tables just to breathe the same air as the Hollywood princess. They dropped massive sums of money, and right beside them, the couriers for the Cosa Nostra were dropping briefcases of cash. The legitimate money and the blood money mixed together on the tables under the glittering chandeliers. When the casino deposited the night's earnings into the Swiss bank accounts, the origins of the funds were untraceable. The blood was washed away by the sheer glamour of the event. Every time Grace smiled at a high roller, the syndicate cleaned another $1 million. The cage closes. She knew. She was not stupid. The isolation sharpened her senses. She saw the men who visited her husband late at night. She noticed the aggressive security details that did not wear palace uniforms. She felt the constant heavy gaze of the men who stood in the corners of the ballrooms. She felt the invisible fishing line attached to her spine. Whenever she tried to step out of line, the line was pulled tight. The psychological toll was devastating. In Hollywood, she was a worker. She memorized lines. She hit her marks. She created characters. In Monaco, she was an object. She was stripped of all agency. She was required to be perfectly beautiful and completely silent. She was a mannequin displaying the power of the men who owned her. The contrast between her internal reality and her external image became a daily torture. She would stand on the palace balcony, waving to the adoring crowds below. The crowd saw a fairy tale. Grace looked down at the courtyard, realizing the absolute parameters of her isolation. Hitchcock's offer. The ultimate test of her captivity came in the early 1960s. Alfred Hitchcock, her former mentor and director, sent her a script. It was the lead role in a film called Marnie. It was a complex psychological thriller. It was a role that required actual acting. It was a rare lifeline thrown into her engineered isolation. Grace read the script in her bedroom. She felt a spark of her old self ignite. She wanted the part. She needed the part. She needed to prove she was still a human being with a talent, and not just a decorative hood ornament for a casino. She approached Rainier. She did not demand. She negotiated. She offered to donate her entire salary to the Monaco Red Cross. She offered to film during the summer holidays to avoid disrupting royal duties. She practically begged. Rainier initially wavered. Then word leaked to the press that Grace Kelly was returning to Hollywood. The public was ecstatic. Then reality intervened. The reaction from the Monegasque public and the conservative press was overwhelmingly hostile. The citizens of Monaco, along with the Catholic Church, were deeply scandalized by the prospect of their princess playing a kleptomaniac on screen. The backlash threatened the carefully constructed dignity of the crown. Bowing to immense public and political pressure, Rainier and the palace advisors forced her to withdraw. The prized asset does not go back to work for a rival corporation. Rainier folded immediately. He entered her private quarters. He did not comfort her. He delivered the verdict. The offer was rejected. She would issue a public statement declining the role. She would cite her devotion to her family and her royal duties. She would lie to the world to protect the business interests of the men who owned them both. Grace wrote the statement. She handed it to the press secretary. She went back to her bedroom. She closed the heavy doors. She did not cry. Crying was a luxury for people who had hope. She felt a cold, hard despair settle in her bones. She realized the absolute totality of her defeat. The Red Cross Ball. The years bled into a seamless, glittering nightmare. The 1960s gave way to the 1970s, and the world outside Monaco underwent violent, radical transformations. Civil rights movements erupted. Wars raged. Cultures shifted. But inside the 2-square-mile fortress of the principality, time was frozen in an artificial state of perpetual aristocratic twilight. Grace Kelly was frozen along with it. Clad in Dior and diamonds, Grace became the undisputed flawless face of Monaco. Her pristine image served as the ultimate marketing tool, legitimizing the principality's booming and often opaque casino economy. The sheer weight of this institutional role stripped away her individuality, transforming the vibrant actress into a carefully managed state asset. The mechanics of her exploitation were brilliant in their simplicity. The men who controlled the Société des Bains de Mer did not need to physically abuse her to assert their dominance. They did not need to brandish weapons in her face. The violence was systemic. It was woven into her schedule, her wardrobe, and her daily obligations. Consider the Red Cross Ball. To the international press, it was the pinnacle of European philanthropy. It was an event dripping with elegance, hosted by the radiant Princess Grace. The photographs showed her dancing with foreign dignitaries and laughing with industry titans. The reality of the ballroom was entirely different. It was a perfectly sanitized neutral zone for the global underworld. Grace stood at the entrance line, fulfilling her contractual obligation. She shook hands with shipping tycoons from Greece, arms dealers from the Middle East, and banking executives from Switzerland. Mixed seamlessly among them were the well-dressed envoys of the Italian Cosa Nostra and the Corsican Mafia. These men did not wear fedoras and carry Tommy guns. They wore bespoke Italian suits and carried diplomatic passports. They smiled politely at the princess. They kissed her gloved hand. Every kiss on her knuckles was a transaction. It was the mob marking its territory in plain sight. Rainier's coup. While Grace slowly suffocated in her golden cage, a dangerous shift in power was occurring in the boardroom of the principality. Prince Rainier was growing restless. For over a decade, he had played the role of the compliant monarch. He had allowed Aristotle Onassis and the Shadow Syndicates to dictate the economic policies of his country. He had allowed them to use his wife as a billboard. He had accepted the humiliation in exchange for the financial salvation of his throne. But Rainier was an arrogant man. The influx of capital had successfully stabilized Monaco. The country was wealthy again. The real estate market was booming. The banks were overflowing. Rainier looked at the thriving economy and decided he no longer needed the training wheels. He resented Onassis. He hated being a junior partner in his own kingdom. He wanted absolute control. In the late 1960s, Rainier initiated a highly aggressive and incredibly dangerous corporate coup. He maneuvered the government to create new shares in the Société des Bains de Mer, effectively diluting Onassis's controlling interest. It was a brutal public eviction. Onassis was furious. He took the matter to the Supreme Court of Monaco, a court controlled entirely by Rainier. Onassis lost. He was forced to sell his shares back to the principality. Rainier celebrated. He thought he had won. He thought he had expelled the dark elements from his country. He was catastrophically naive. Expelling a legitimate, albeit ruthless, businessman like Onassis was one thing. Expelling the entrenched networks of the Cosa Nostra and the Corsican Mafia was an entirely different proposition. Onassis had been a buffer. He had managed the criminal elements, keeping them organized and relatively discreet. When Onassis left, he created a massive power vacuum. The underworld did not pack up and leave with him. They entrenched themselves deeper. The Invisible War. The syndicates viewed Rainier's move not as a liberation, but as a hostile takeover attempt of their laundering facilities. They had invested millions in the infrastructure of Monte Carlo. They had utilized the princess to legitimize their operations globally. They were not going to surrender their most profitable washing machine just because the local prince suddenly found his pride. The Invisible War began. The 1970s saw a sharp increase in tension between the palace and the casino operators. Rainier tried to enforce stricter regulations. He tried to bring in independent auditors. He attempted to pivot the economy away from gambling and toward legitimate international banking and real estate development. Every move he made threatened the core revenue streams of the Mafia. The syndicates responded with typical chilling efficiency. They did not declare open war. They sent messages. There were sudden, inexplicable labor strikes at the luxury hotels. There were mysterious fires at construction sites funded by the crown. Key financial advisors to the prince suffered sudden fatal heart attacks or fatal car accidents on the winding mountain roads of the French Riviera. The message was clear. We own the plumbing of this country. If you try to shut off the water, we will burn the house down. Grace was caught directly in the crossfire. For the first 15 years of her marriage, she was a highly valued asset. She was protected because she was profitable. But as Rainier initiated his war against the syndicates, her value shifted. She was no longer just a mascot. She was leverage. The final decision. The Mafia operates on the principle of vulnerability. When negotiating with an adversary, you identify what they value most, and you hold it hostage. Rainier valued his throne, but he also valued the global reputation of his dynasty. That reputation rested entirely on the shoulders of Princess Grace. She was the only thing standing between the Grimaldi family and total international irrelevance. The invisible fishing line attached to her spine was suddenly pulled taut by new, much more violent hands. The subtle threats began to penetrate the palace walls. Unsolicited advice from concerned citizens regarding the safety of her children. Strange men loitering near the private entrances of the royal residences. The psychological warfare was relentless. Grace tried to warn Rainier. She begged him to back down. She understood that you cannot negotiate with a cancer. You can only hope to survive it. But Rainier was blinded by his own hubris. He believed his sovereign immunity protected him. He believed the international community would not allow a monarch to be intimidated by thugs. He underestimated the absolute ruthlessness of men who operate entirely outside the boundaries of human morality. The tension peaked in the early 1980s. Rainier was preparing to launch a massive final offensive to completely restructure the casino operations, aiming to cut the illicit syndicates out of the profits permanently. He was drafting new legislation. He was secretly negotiating with legitimate American casino corporations to take over the management of Monte Carlo. It was a fatal miscalculation. The Cosa Nostra does not accept severance packages. They do not recognize the authority of local princes. They recognize only blood and money. The decision was made. A message had to be delivered to the Prince of Monaco. They could not kill Rainier. Assassinating a reigning European monarch would trigger an international geopolitical crisis. It would bring the combined weight of Interpol, French intelligence, and American authorities crashing down on their operations. They needed a target that would destroy the prince emotionally and politically without triggering a global war. They needed to destroy the very foundation of his public image. They needed to shatter the fairy tale. They looked at Grace Kelly. She had transformed instantly from prized asset into acceptable collateral damage. September 1982. The summer of 1982 was unusually oppressive. A heavy, stagnant heat hung over the Mediterranean. Grace felt a creeping, suffocating dread. She became increasingly paranoid. She refused to employ the standard royal drivers, preferring to drive herself. She altered her daily routines. She was a woman who knew she was being hunted, but could not see the hunters. She was trapped on a 2-square-mile rock, surrounded by enemies disguised as courtiers and businessmen. The executioners did not plan a public shooting. A bullet fired in the streets of Monaco would force the French police and international authorities to launch a massive homicide investigation. It would disrupt the lucrative casino operations. It would cause a global diplomatic incident. The syndicate required a surgical strike. They needed a death that looked entirely mundane. They chose gravity and mechanics as their murder weapons. The target was her vehicle. Grace drove a 1971 Rover P6 3500. It was a heavy, solidly built British luxury car. She preferred it for navigating the narrow, treacherous mountain roads that connected the Rock Aigle estate to the coastline of Monaco. The syndicate mechanics knew the car intimately. They knew its weight. They knew its vulnerabilities. Most importantly, they knew the exact route Grace would take to descend the mountain. The Route de la Tourbie is a notoriously dangerous stretch of asphalt. It is a steep, winding descent carved directly into the cliff face. It features sharp hairpin turns and sheer drops of over 100 feet into rocky ravines. There are no guardrails strong enough to stop a 2-ton vehicle traveling at high speed. A failure of the braking system on the Route de la Tourbie is a guaranteed death sentence. The sabotage required precision. The Rover P6 3500 was equipped with a dual-circuit braking system. In a dual-circuit system, the front brakes and the rear brakes operate on completely independent hydraulic lines. If the primary line fails or ruptures, the secondary line immediately engages, providing the driver with enough stopping power to halt the vehicle safely. A simultaneous total failure of both independent hydraulic circuits is a statistical impossibility under normal driving conditions. It does not happen by chance. It happens by design. To completely disable the stopping power of a Rover P6, an individual must physically access the undercarriage and intentionally sever or bleed both the primary and secondary brake lines. It is a deliberate act of sabotage. It is a highly calculated method of murder. The crash. The morning of September 13, 1982, began with the mundane choreography of royal life. Grace and her 17-year-old daughter Stephanie were preparing to return to the palace in Monaco. The autumn season was beginning. The schedule was filling up with charity galas and state dinners. Grace was packing her dresses. She laid out large, heavy evening gowns and hat boxes. The royal chauffeur, Rene Giuliani, brought the Rover up to the front entrance of the farmhouse. He saw the sheer volume of luggage. He offered to drive. Grace refused. She was adamant. She ordered the chauffeur to step aside. She cited the dresses in the back seat as the reason, claiming they would be crushed if she did not drive. But the underlying reality was her deep, unshakable paranoia. She did not trust the man in the uniform. She did not trust anyone employed by the state. Her husband was currently turning Monaco into a battlefield. She wanted her hands on the wheel. She believed she was protecting her daughter by taking control of the machine. She drove the Rover out of the gates of Rock Aigle. The trap was sprung. The descent began. They approached the most treacherous section of the Route de la Tourbie, the steep downward gradient leading directly into a massive sharp hairpin turn known to the locals as the Devil's Curse. Grace pressed her foot against the brake pedal. The pedal offered no resistance. It sank completely to the floorboard. There was no hydraulic pressure. There was no mechanical bite. The dual circuit system was dead. The primary line was severed. The secondary line was severed. The machine was no longer a car. It was a 2-ton missile accelerating down a steep incline, propelled entirely by gravity. Grace pumped the pedal frantically. She ripped at the emergency handbrake. The mechanical linkages had been neutralized. The vehicle continued to gain speed. The hairpin turn rushed toward them with terrifying velocity. Directly behind the Royal Rover, a large commercial truck was navigating the same descent. The driver of the truck, Yves Philippot, had a clear, unobstructed view of the back of Grace's vehicle. He became the most important forensic witness to the assassination. He stated categorically to the French police that the brake lights on the Rover never illuminated, not for a single fraction of a second. The back of the car remained entirely dark as it hurtled toward the cliff edge. This detail is paramount. Brake lights are operated by a simple electrical switch connected directly to the brake pedal. If a driver suffers a sudden medical emergency, their foot naturally drops onto the pedal and the lights flash. But the brake lights never illuminated. This suggests the electrical system connected to the brakes had also been disabled, or that the pedal linkage itself had been physically detached. The vehicle slammed through the retaining wall and plunged 120 feet down the sheer rock face. It smashed through trees. It slammed into jagged boulders. The roof crushed inward. The cabin was obliterated. The Cosa Nostra had delivered their message. They had bypassed the palace walls. They had reached into the private sanctuary of the royal family and annihilated their most valuable asset. The stroke story. The first responders arrived at the wreckage. They found Stephanie alive. They found Grace unconscious, pinned in the twisted metal, suffering from catastrophic brain injuries and massive internal hemorrhaging. She was rushed to the Monaco hospital. Back at the palace, Prince Rainier received the news. He knew exactly what the crushed car meant. He knew this was not an act of God. He knew it was the invoice for his arrogance. He had tried to break the contract with the devil, and the devil had executed his wife in retaliation. But if he cried murder, he would have to admit that his entire principality was controlled by organized crime. He would have to initiate a war he could not possibly win. He chose the only path the syndicate allowed him. He chose the cover-up. The palace communications office moved immediately. They needed a narrative that removed the possibility of foul play. They needed a story that blamed biology rather than mechanics. They needed to ensure the public believed the crash was an unavoidable tragedy. The official palace statement claimed that Princess Grace had suffered a mild stroke while driving. They asserted that this sudden neurological event caused her to lose control of the vehicle. It was a perfect lie. It shifted the focus away from the rover. It shifted the focus away from the brakes. It turned the victim into the cause of her own death. The syndicate did not kill her. Her own body did. That was the story. The public accepted it. The destroyed evidence. But the forensic reality refused to align with the palace fiction. The doctors located a hemorrhage, but the trauma from a 120-foot plunge down a rocky cliff face made it nearly impossible to distinguish a pre-existing mild stroke from the catastrophic head injuries caused by the crash itself. The palace seized on that ambiguity and weaponized it. The most damning evidence was not the medical chart. It was the treatment of the rover itself. In any standard fatal traffic accident involving a head of state, the vehicle becomes the central piece of forensic evidence. It is secured, analyzed, stripped down, and examined independently. None of that happened. The royal family blocked a full independent investigation. The rover was removed under palace authority and taken to a secured location controlled by Monegasque authorities loyal to the crown. Then came the final act of erasure. The wreckage was never meaningfully subjected to the kind of independent scrutiny that could settle the question. Decades later, under royal decree, the rover was quietly crushed. Every mechanical component that could have definitively proved or disproved sabotage was permanently obliterated. To skeptics, that was not respect for the dead. It was the final confession of a cover-up. The message landed. Inside the hospital, the machines kept breathing for her. Outside, the palace kept constructing the lie. On September 14, 1982, the life support machines were disconnected. Grace Kelly, the Queen of Hollywood, the Princess of Monaco, the immaculate captive queen of the Mediterranean, was dead. She was 52 years old. The world erupted in mourning. The public believed a beloved icon had been taken by tragic chance. But the men in the tailored suits, the men who operated the shadow economy of the principality, did not mourn. They had neutralized a liability. They had delivered a devastating message to a rebellious prince. And the message landed. Prince Rainier's resistance broke. The campaign to expel the illicit syndicates from the casino operations evaporated. The audits stopped. The restructuring stalled. The war ended in unconditional surrender. He kept his throne, but he ruled a highly profitable graveyard. Grace Kelly had escaped the grueling demands of the Hollywood studio system, only to surrender her autonomy to a much darker institution. She remains immortalized as an icon of elegance, a woman who appeared to win the ultimate prize. But behind the diamonds, behind the balcony waves, behind the magazine covers, stood a brutal political and financial machine that required her face, her silence, and her obedience. She had made a deal with the devil. She had traded one system of ownership for another. She was not simply a princess. She was a highly valuable state asset deployed to legitimize an economy deeply entangled in illicit power. And when that asset became politically inconvenient, the system that benefited from her existence did what systems like that always do. It removed her. The fairy tale did not end in romance. It ended with a mangled rover at the bottom of a ravine. This has been Grace Kelly, Monaco, the Mafia, and the princess they bought. A Pizzaverse Studios documentary. A Palermo Productions original. Written by Bambi Palermo. Narrated by Vincent Di-Prio. If you want more stories about the blood beneath the glamour, the systems behind the crowns, and the truths buried under wealth, fame, and power, stay with the Pizzaverse. Because fairy tales are cheap. Power is where the real story begins. Thank you for watching. Thank you for supporting the channel. And thank you for being here as these stories are pulled apart piece by piece. For every glamorous lie, every polished myth, and every beautiful image hiding a darker contract, there is always value in dragging the truth back into the light. Grace Kelly. Prince Rainier III. Aristotle Onassis. You ever wake up in a hotel room with no pants, a fake passport, and 3 missed calls from your ex-wife and your parole officer? Yeah? Then you need alibi shades. Courtrooms, backdoor meeting, or the back of a police car. Developed by the same guys who invented selective memory, these shades are designed to block flashbangs, questions, eye contact with snitches, the crushing weight of moral responsibility. Alibi shades. I ain't seen nothing, officer, just the sunrise and my manicure. Alibi shades in interrogation black, snitch-proof smoke, and witness protection chrome. Alibi shades for when you gotta look the DA dead in the face and say, never met the guy. Available at Lou Carboni's Pawn and Optometry, under Bambi's mattress and select glove compartments in Newark.
Yeah, I done did a lot of things in my day, I admit it, I don't take back what I say. If I said it, then I meant it. All my life I won a Grammy, but I probably never get it. I ain't never had no trophy or no motherfucking ribbon. Fuck the system, I'm that nigga, bend the law, cut the rules. I'm about to risk it all, I ain't got too much to lose. Y'all been eating long enough, it's my turn to cut the food. Pass the plate, win my drink, this my day. Lucky you, fuck you too, woo! Y'all gotta move, y'all gotta move. Gotta move, give me some room, give me some room, give me the juice. How about the coupe? How about the coupe? How about the shoot? Y'all gotta move, y'all gotta move, give me the juice. Back on my bullshit, my back to the wall, turn my back on you, all of you finished. Back to these bullets, it's back to the job, put my Mac out and all of you running. Back on my hood shit, it's back to the pushing, these taxing, I'm actually pumping. Can't fuck with you rappers, you practically sucking. You might have went platinum, but that don't mean nothing. I'm actually buzzing this time. Straight out the kitchen, I told them the oven is mine. I do not fuck with you guys. If I don't kill you, just know you gon' suffer this time. I ain't no gangster, but I got some bangers, some chains and some blazing, a couple of nines. Choppers and jimmies, a partridge, a petri. My 20s and Christmas was nothing but lies. Run at you hot like a sumo. They say I talk like a chulo. I live in Mars, I'm not Bruno. Bitch, I'm a duck, call me Cujo. You play your cards, I reverse on you all, and I might just drop all like a Uno. Cállate boca, my home, they call it Obuto, and all of you culo. Never better to level up in the ghetto, looking for something I probably can never find now. Shit irrelevant till the beat die down. The stupid niggas just really want me tied down. I've been alone and I never needed nobody, just only me and my shawty. I tell these niggas to lie down. Keep all the money, I never wanted a lifestyle. But I pray to God I'm gonna be all right now. I said ain't no love for the other side or anyone who ever wants smoke. When I die, I'm going out as the underdog who never lost hope. You in the wrong cab, down the wrong path, nigga, wrong way, wrong road. Snakes in the grass, trying to slither fast. I just bought a fucking lawnmower.
I said a lot of things in my day. I admit it, this is payback in a way. I regret it that I did it. I done won a couple Grammys, but I sold my soul to get them. Wasn't in it for the trophies, just the fucking recognition. Fuck's the difference, I'm that cracker, been the law, fuck the rules. Man, I used to risk it all, now I got too much to lose. I've been eating long enough, man, my stomach should be full. I just ate, lick the plate, my buffet. Lucky me, fuck you think. I got a couple of mentions, still I don't have any manners. You got a couple of ghostwriters, but to these kids it don't actually matter. They're asking me what the fuck happened to hip-hop. I said I don't have any answers, cause I took a nap when I dropped my last album. It hurt me like hell, but I'm back on these rappers. And actually coming from humble beginnings, I'm somewhat uncomfortable winning. I wish I could say what a wonderful feeling. We're on the upswing like we're punching the ceiling, but nothing is feeling like anyone has any fucking ability to even stick to a subject. Is killing me, the inability to pin humility. Why don't we make a bunch of fucking songs about nothing and mumble and bucket? I'm going for the juggler, shit is a circus. You clowns that are coming up, don't give an ounce of a motherfucker about the ones that were here before you that made rap. This recap, way back, and tease that, recap on tape decks, 8 tats with a G-raps. That we need 3 stacks ASAP and bring that to the ace back, cause half of these rappers have brain damage. On a lean rapping, face tats syrupped out like tree sap. I don't hate trap and I don't wanna seem mad, but in fact, what I owe me at the same cat that would take that feedback and aim back. I need that, but I think it's that's inevitable. They know a button to press and whatever the pull to give me the snap though. And if I paid attention, I'm probably making it bigger, but you've been taking your dicks on a fucking backhoe. On the freaking minute, got me thinking of finishing everything with a seed of innocent and reaping the benefits. I'm asleep at the wheel again as I'm thinking about an evil intent of another beat. I'm a kill again. Cause even if I gotta end up eating a pill again, even ketamine and methamphetamine with a mini tin, it better be at least 70 or 300 milligram. And I might as well, cause I'ma end up being a villain again. Levels to the shit, I got an elevator. You could never say to me, I'm not a fucking record breaker. I sound like a broken record every time I break a record. Nobody could ever take away the legacy I made. I never gave a motherfucker, never got a right to be this way. I got spiked inside my DNA, but I roll till the wheels fall off. I'm working tirelessly, ayy. It's the moment y'all been waiting for, like California wishing rain to pour, and that drought y'all been praying for. My downfall, from the 8 Mile to the South Pass, to the same marshal, that outlaw that they say is a rider might have fell off. I'm back on that bull like the cowboy. So y'all gotta move, yeah, y'all gotta move, yeah, y'all gotta move.
Give me some room, give me some room. Give me the juice. How about the coupe? How about the coupe? How about the shoot? Y'all gotta move. Y'all gotta move. Give me the juice.